Welcome to Inner Voice of Knowing podcast. I'm Kay Doran, a shamanic leadership coach and healer, guiding you through life with a foot in both worlds. When you understand the terrain of the inner landscapes, the mental, emotional, spiritual, and energetic, you will become the leader within your physical life, both personally and professionally. After all, the power of change is in your hands. Let's get this journey started. Welcome everyone back to Inner Voice of Knowing. I'm always sort of saying the same thing. You know, I'm really excited to have this guest on. I don't go searching for people. It just reveals itself. And this beautiful woman who lives currently in Florida, but, you know, born and raised in Michigan, reached out to me, then wanted to connect on Zoom. I very, very rarely do that because usually people just want to sell something. I think there are a few questions that went backward and forward, and it's like, no, I can give you this time. And we just chatted across the globe. And then I just couldn't help at the end go, would you like to be a guest on my podcast? And I'm sure the listeners will find out why. But first, Amy Maikoski, let me welcome you to the Inner Voice of Knowing podcast.
Thank you so very much, Kay. I truly am blessed and excited to share this space with you.
Thank you. I was fascinated because you're now sort of a holistic transformational trainer, you know, doing this amazing work, very clearly a kindred spirit in terms of being of service. Not what can you get from it? How much can I give? But then your background's really interesting because you're a veteran of the USAF, United States Air Force. You've been in banking, but there was a story from your childhood. So let's actually start there. How did you grow up? Who were you as a child? And just give us a little bit of an insight into Amy way back when.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Kay. So I was born at Southwest Michigan in Kalamazoo, Michigan. Yes, there really is a Kalamazoo.
I was going to say that sounds like something out of Wizard of Oz.
Yes, and there's many songs, interestingly enough, because the rest of the world also understands it's a very catchy city. But I am third oldest of 10 beautiful children. My parents are both double education music majors. So you can imagine the plethora of knowledge and love and excitement and fun in our home. However, when I was born, my oldest sister was very, very ill, and my older brother was a boy. And boys obviously find ways to not be all too involved in what's going on in the household, let alone any female responsibilities that daughters usually take. And so I held a very powerful space in my home, whether I wanted to or not. Mm-hmm. And in that, I felt... and now as an adult, I've had lots of time to reflect and do back on that work. But as an adult, I look back and remember the feelings of not belonging. Yeah. Remember the feelings of, wait a minute, I didn't sign up for this. You know, I don't get to go outside and play with everybody else. I not only was responsible for all of my younger siblings, but also my parents as a child.
That's a lot, Amy. Did you feel the weight of that? Aside from feeling like you're not belonging, but did you actually or was that just normal for you because you knew no different?
Exactly. Yes, ma'am. That's where it came from. So it was normal. I knew I was different than everybody else, but I didn't understand at that time, or even well into my adulthood, that responsibility was something assigned to me, that I was given that ability to be resilient and understand and have sensitivity to people's emotions and their energies, and to fix that, not necessarily through my own human knowing, but through whatever was given to me to do so. And I freely did it because it came natural.
So at what age, Amy, were you sort of aware that you were I mean, 10 kids, that's one of 10. And parents, at what age were you becoming aware that this responsibility was sitting on you?
Oh my goodness. From recollection, I could probably go back even as early into the 3 and 4-year-old ages.
Oh, wow. And I've got
Yes,
chills,
yes.
listeners. I've got chills washing over me. Yeah.
Um, Again, I can't say that I raised my hand to it, but it was just what it was supposed to be.
Yeah.
And because the warmth that I received in doing it, not even received from those that I was serving, but the warmth that I had inside of me, I didn't question it. It was very, very natural.
Wow. Training ground, I'd say.
Yes, from a very young age. Yes.
Wow. And did your siblings acknowledge it, or this is just how it was?
No, I was not received well.
Okay.
I was not received well as much as I wanted more time with my siblings, whether it was the position that I held because of what I needed to do in the family or whether it was how I showed up. I was always on the outskirts. I wasn't the one that, got asked to play outside or go ride bikes together. I always had to almost push myself into the spaces where my other siblings were joined and having fun and excited because everyone looked at me as, oh, Amy's here. And
Yeah.
that was very, very challenging, very lonely, very, very lonely.
Yeah. Yeah. And so did you have fun as a child?
Oh, my mercy, yes. So my fun, my fun was outdoors in Mother Earth.
Yeah.
If nobody else wanted to play with me, I would go climb a tree. I would build forts outside. I would explore. There wasn't a tree that I didn't know every piece of bark and where each time that it bloomed first in the seasons. And I knew which bugs were in which trees and which birds were in which trees and the bushes and the wildlife, the water, anytime that I could find a brook or a pond. I love Mother Earth. Her and I are, she is very much so the reason why I am still here today and find great solace and peace and serenity, but strength. So much strength in the wind and the storms and the rains and the all of that magical stuff elevates my energy even to this day. And I remember all of
Yeah.
those beautiful moments were connected to nature.
This is one of the reasons, and when you speak about this, I just get chills wash over me because for me it is so familiar. Okay, like
Mm,
different
yeah.
upbringing, but those same feelings of feeling outcast, even in my family, in the world, but that connection, that shamanic connection that I had to nature, my ability to speak and commune with Mother Earth and the trees, and that too was my protective playground, I suppose, is the way that I would describe it. Protective and connective playground, where
Yes.
I used to think, it's my imagination. I look back now going, no, it's not my imagination. It was the dance I was doing with energy and nature.
Oh, I so agree. And I really do believe that that connecting force was something that when you and I chatted, and even when we did vacillate back and forth, and I felt a natural resistance, I knew immediately it was because of the same feelings
Mhm.
that we do get propositioned often because the energy that we have is very, very interesting to people. They want to know more about it. They want to know who we are and they want their piece of it without understanding it, just knowing that it's unique and it draws them in. And that's been my entire life. But even with all of that attention, Kay, I've always simply been me, and that was enough.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that is so beautiful and so powerful to say. And I want to say at this point, this is why it's important that even though we were strangers across the globe meeting, there was an openness. And in that
Yeah.
openness, there's a permission. So even when I
Mhm.
was experiencing things, I'm a little bit older than you, and I'm experiencing things, and then you're able to open up because it's like, I'm not the only one. I know that when I said to a very dear friend, who when I first met her, she was actually a coach of mine. We're now collaborating together in a new business as well. But I remember being open enough to say to her, look, as a child, this will seem weird to you, but, I would sing to a cow. I would look into its eyes and I would become one with it and I would feel everything it felt and I would sing this song and the cow would moo and walk away thinking, oh God, what have I just said? And she went, oh, for me, it was a chicken. It was like, I would
That's
take this
so
chicken around in the pram and but if we don't be open, one, we don't
yes.
get the opportunity to know each other, but also to validate and support each other in just the sharing of our life story. And they don't need to be secrets. Like, stand proud. This is who I am. This is how I was as a child. Think I'm nuts, or it will bring you in closer.
Absolutely, yes. And I love the comment that you said about really believing that, am I making this up? Is this really pretend? And I was known as a child for making up lots of stories. I was a great creator, but I had to. That was my mechanism of finding identity because nobody understood the language that was coming through my head and my heart. And so I did make up things many, many times as a child. But in that, it was my safety mechanism.
Yes.
And my animals were the lizards and the snakes and the frogs and the all of those things in Michigan. We
Yeah.
had dogs and we had cats and they were animals and they were great, but they were not outdoors. They were not wild like me. And I always felt wild because I never felt like I could be tameable. The rules that were given to me were so, I'm not even limiting. It didn't even bother me that there were rules. They just didn't feel like they applied. I was
Okay.
like, are you talking to me?
So I'm hearing that the dogs and the typical animals, they belonged in the family. Community loved
Mhm.
them. But the frogs and the
Yes.
lizards were the unknown. And there's that familiarity for you and that sense of belonging and connectedness. That's what I'm hearing by what you're saying.
Absolutely.
Was
Absolutely.
there anyone there that you were able to turn to or that understood you or that was able to guide or connect with you?
Oh, yes. By only by the grace of my creator that loved me enough to allow me to have one person. And I didn't get to see her as often as I would have liked to as a child because she lived 3 hours away. But my dad's mom,
Mm-hmm.
my grandma Anna, um, the moment that I remember, even all the way back as a very, very young child, the attraction and the heat that we would share in each other's space, but I could simply look into her eyes and so much information and words and language would come out and her mouth wouldn't even open.
Wow.
um, being in her space, not even touching her, but being physically in her space was almost like going to the hospital, where I wouldn't see her for a few months at a time because we would have to take that family trip. But when I knew we were going to Grandma Anna's, my even now speaking of it, my entire body would be electrified, and I would look so forward to that. And I remember probably 5 or 6 years old, sitting next to her on the couch. She was a very small woman, and I was not a small child. I was very athletic and solid. I solid as a rock,
Yeah.
and so I would sit next to her. Otherwise, I would probably smush her. But and watch her and feel her. And very seldom would words come out, but every time that they did, they were so profound. And I remember the first time that everything made sense. I was sitting next to her on the couch in the front room, And there was chaos going on all around. Uncles and my grandfather and my parents, everybody was having a blast. But it felt like the space between Grandma Anna and I, there was no noise. Like I could hear all of it, but it wasn't interrupting what we had. And she looked at me and she said, "My sweet Amy, you know that you're special, but it's a special that you're not going to understand. And when you feel that way, I want you to always close your eyes and think of me."
Wow. That is so powerful. How old were you, Amy?
I was 5 or 6. I was 5 or 6. So I had already felt the responsibility of taking care of siblings, and it was already very natural and organic. But at that point in my life, I knew I wasn't alone. I knew that somebody saw me for the first time.
Oof.
For the first time, I received a wraparound, almost a bubble, a protective bubble of no matter what anybody else ever thinks or doesn't understand, it didn't matter anymore because I had that with her. And we had a few quiet moments like that up until she left me 20 years ago or so. But she's never left me.
No.
I still in this beautiful space have learned the open doors to not only her, but the other generational gifts of those beautiful souls that are my ancestral army and encircle me on all occasions and have saved me from leaving this earthly existence too soon because I have such a purpose to do here.
What a powerful but also understated role that she played for you in your life.
Absolutely.
And doesn't it only take one person or even one conversation that can just impact you forever?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Because even into the times that I grew up and we didn't see much more of each other, and I joined the military and I did a lot more traveling and it was much more scarce, it didn't ever matter. It literally was a closing of the eyes and a connection of souls. And she was right there with me. And even through her pain of leaving this physical existence that she had to experience, she knew too that I reciprocated the same for her. And her life was very, very tumultuous. And she finally, through a grandchild, received that and had to wait many more years than I did receiving that from her so young. So I am nothing short of grateful of that amazing connection. And then when I crossed paths with Miss Kay Duran, and all of a sudden there's a revival. There's a revival and an amplification of my energy. Not that I don't get it otherwise, but life happens and we get tired and we feel the pressure and we feel the responsibility. And to know that on the other side of the world, that I have now made connections with a shamanic sister that understands on levels that I don't have to explain. We don't have to have that conversation because it is something that we understand, and that's all that matters. And the power of it in this planetary state ignites the earth. That is why we are able to continue through the darkness, the confusion, the chaos, the control, all of those crazy, amazing things, because there are those of us in this world that understand what our responsibility is and take it proudly, as difficult as it is, and raise our hands too high every day and go, all right, whatever it is that I get to do today to serve and pour into those that cross my path, I'm wide open to it.
Oh, bless you. That's so beautiful. Thank you. And you know, the right people appear at the right time and when we're ready. You know, and this is one of the beautiful things, because social media gets bagged a lot. And I understand
Mm,
why, but it's our responsibility as to how we, like anything in life, how we approach
yeah.
it, how we respond to it. But, I have met some amazing people and worked with some
Mm,
amazing people across the globe, as clients and friends and all the rest of it because of social media. Um,
yes.
and that's why I come back with very direct questions, because it will clear out people very quickly. Um,
Mm,
but this is one of I think of social media sometimes like, that campfire that we can gather around. Yes, there can be all the negative, there can be the nasty and all the rest, but let's make it a campfire where we can actually bring positivity, conversations, authenticity, and as you were
mm,
saying that, with all your connection uh, to earth and God, divinity, whatever you like to call it, source, it doesn't matter. But then that human condition that we all have. We all feel pain. We all feel sadness at times. We all feel grief. We all bleed blood. Do you know what I mean?
yes,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah. So, what led you then into the Air Force? A girl of nature, connected to frogs and lizards and reading the trees. What drove you into the Air Force?
Absolutely. So my father served in Vietnam,
Hmm.
and his father and many generations back all served in World War II. We didn't go back as far as World War I because we weren't in the United States yet. Our families came over two generations, but they all served in the military, and those that were in Europe served in their military services. And so I, as a, again, connected to someone bigger that was in my current space, really took great honor and pride when I heard my grandfather and my grandma Anna share the pictures,
Uh-huh.
the them in my family in uniforms that held these great spaces and went out and did what many other people didn't want to do.
Yeah.
Went out and did the hard stuff and showed up and were resilient enough to be that volunteer. And there was great pride in that service that they gave that really resonated with me, really got me excited because I felt like I was that anyway. I felt like I was that person that was always out on the front of the war, handling, putting out all the fires, handling all the
Yes.
situations. And so that to me was like, well, wait a minute, this is really cool. And more than cool, there's again a connection to the masculine side of the leaders that were in my world that didn't necessarily have the gift of what was shared with me through the generations, but they had the conviction, they had the
Yeah.
resilience, they had the love for humanity to do the hard things. And, for me, that was huge. And in a family of 10 children, there wasn't any of my siblings that had any interest in the military. And as much as my daddy was an amazing man, there was no emotional connection. He
Hmm.
was not taught emotion, so he did not know how to share emotion. And that was my connection to him. That was my love for him, to know the darkness that he did not talk about his wartime. He did not talk about his service, but there was something inside of him that I connected with that wanted to honor that. And when I joined the military, he was extremely bothered. He was
Yeah.
not supportive. He did not like it. He said, absolutely not. My little girl is not going into the military. But by the time I shared it with him, I had already signed my contract. And I was so excited to go. There was absolutely nothing, no doubt in my mind that I wanted to
Mm.
go. But I went into medical. And so I was, prior to the military, I was actually in a medical internship. I graduated early from high school and was taking pre med courses and really, really, really wanted to go into medicine because I loved the human body. I
Yeah.
loved the anatomy of the human body and the power of the brain and all of these magical things that I wanted to know more about it. And so that was my direction. And the Air Force was my answer because I was in an internship and going to school and working a full-time job, because in a family of 10, nobody sends you to college. And so I was running myself ragged and could not keep up in my physical earthly existence to all of the demands. And that was an answer that answered several things for me internally as well as professionally, and got me out of Kalamazoo, which for many, many years
Yeah.
I felt, get me out of here, because I see the people that I graduated with and that my brothers and sisters graduated with, and they're stuck here doing nothing with themselves.
Yeah.
And I don't want that to happen. I want that opportunity. So wanting to get out into the world and see more of, there's got to be something more out there than what I know here.
I want to throw this question out, and I understand
Yes.
everything that you've said. I can feel
Uh-huh.
it makes sense. But I sit here as you're talking, and I wonder, that child that felt connection to the earth, that felt
Mm,
that the history in the trees and the cycles of the trees and the lizards and the frogs and the, that's all also a very feminine energy. Energy.
yes.
We're not talking men, women here. I wonder, to balance that out, do you feel like you needed to also step into all that action, all, a more masculine energy to balance the two out in your growth process?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because as not just even the fact that I am feminine, but in the roles that I held, it was always healing,
Yeah.
healing and pouring into people and healing. And that got exhausting. And so I absolutely strived for masculine energy. My older brother is 2 years older than me, and I tried even so young just to be in his space. But because we looked very similar and I was his little sister, it was like
Yeah.
the little tomboy that would follow him around. And so I was always rejected, not allowed
Yeah.
to be in his space. And because my daddy worked, wee hours of the morning to wee hours of the night as a fourth grade teacher for 30 years,
Hmm.
the rest of the world got him, but I never got him. And so that was my desire and my cling to attach to that masculine energy in the earth as well as in my generations, and
Yes.
connecting to those that had come before. Absolutely.
That's beautiful that you seem to have always had this awareness of the generations beyond your family, that generation, and
Yes.
sort of that natural tracking of that lineage. Um,
Mm,
and even the respect and understanding, which so many people don't do now, of those before us that have gone to war, but the deeper reasons as to why they've gone and what it took and the toll on them. Hence I can completely understand why your father would have, I don't want my little girl going into this. And if he was in the
absolutely.
Vietnam War, I mean, any war, horrific,
Yes.
what's seen and experienced,
Yes.
that you would never wish
Absolutely.
anyone to have to see or experience.
No, no,
Yeah.
no, no.
And so what then came after that?
Absolutely. So after I went and got my certifications and licensures and trainings, I moved to my first duties. Well, no, actually, in Texas at my training, life happened, and I was a part of exploring what alcohol and parties and all those fun things were. And in a one moment happenstance, I became a single mom.
Yeah.
And because I knew that I had housing, I had a profession, I had medical care, it didn't really matter that the biological father of that son wanted absolutely nothing to do with me. cast me out, called me very ugly names. Although there was participation on both sides, but my son was born at Wright-Patterson in Ohio. And I loved my Wright-Patterson location because I got to start connecting with some very big generals. And the work that I got to do, not that the other staff were not amazing, but there was something about their leadership and their conviction and their resilience that resonated with me. And so I loved Wright-Patterson. But my son was my life. There was a lot in that phase of life where I started to be very critical of myself, started questioning, who am I? Why am I really here? Excuse my French, but this shit is hard. And man, I don't like it. I don't like it. And I'm lonely and I'm tired of being lonely, tired of being rejected. I'm tired of feeling like I have to make all of these connections in life. Could something good just happen to me? And when my son was born, that was it. He was my everything. He kept me going. The light in his eyes, the energy that he was born with as a very, very wise soul. And he needed to be prepared to hold that space for me. But I'm ever grateful for that. And when we moved to Florida, which was my second duty station, I left him in Michigan with my mother because I needed to go down and find a home and get everything set up and get daycare for him or a nanny or whatever the case be. And I brought him down to Florida and had him for about a week down there to get settled, and then had to take him to his nanny on the way to work. And that very first morning that I took him to work, we were T-boned in a terrible accident, and he was going to be taken away from me.
Oh my gosh.
We were T-boned on his side of the car, and his car seat was shattered, and I couldn't move. And I looked over at him when I was revived from being knocked unconscious, and his beautiful 9-month-old face was shattered into spaces that I could not recognize him. And I thought my life was done. I really believed
Amy,
that if you didn't kill me, you should have, because I don't want to be here if I don't have my son. And within 24 hours, he was in ICU, and they said, he may not make it through the night. So here I was, a single mom, all alone, doing this. My family's in Michigan. I'm down in Florida. My mom is busy taking care of my older sister who has brain cancer. And I am all alone. And I called her and I said, Mom, I can't do this anymore. I just can't do this. I'm going to lose Malik. And if I lose him, I don't know that you'll have me anymore either. And I didn't ever say those things. I never felt that despaired. But in that moment, absolutely.
Yeah.
In that moment. And I closed my eyes after that phone call to Mom. And my grandmother, Anna, I didn't even call her because I didn't have to. I simply closed my eyes, and she sent armies of angels to me in that moment and reminded me that the reason that I was still sitting there and that Malik was still with us was because all of these angels were around us and that we would be just fine, and to continue breathing and staying focused on Mother Earth's energy, continue grounding, continue breathing, connect to that, go outside and do that, and then come in and sit with Malik and convey that to him. And I had that ability only, again, from human experience of complete loss. But I should not have, nor neither of us should have made it through that accident that day. And now he is the oldest of 8 beautiful children, a dad of 4, and thriving through life. And so, yes.
What changed for you? I've just actually recorded my episode that's coming out on Saturday about adversity. And shit, Amy, that is adversity. But I always have this saying that shit either stinks up the place or we use it to fertilize the garden. What
Oh
was
my
it for
goodness, that's what
you?
Grandma Anna would say.
I thought it was my own, but
No, it was a different way.
yeah,
She
yeah,
would
yeah.
say, the grass is greener on the other side, but only because there's a whole lot of shit over there to fertilize the
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
grass.
yeah, yeah. I love it. I love it. But I want to take this opportunity that pulls at, I'm a mother, I'm a grandmother,
Yeah,
pulls at my heartstrings. And that would be every mother's worst nightmare.
absolutely.
And the fact that you had the ability to then also, if everyone knew in the unseen world the support and the love and how we are held and what a
Yes,
blessing that you had that gift in that moment. What did change for you? Because clearly something very positively changed for you because of that call to your mother, then that experience with your grandmother. I feel like I can almost
absolutely.
feel her
So,
presence now.
yeah.
And this is powerful because a lot of people go through some real tragedy, but you've pulled yourself out. So out of that experience changed for you and
So what
changed you?
absolutely. So in that moment, again, calling my mother who could not help me.
Mm.
And again, another no, another I'm not available, another nope, you got to figure this out. And she didn't say any of those things, but
Yeah.
my my ego obviously attached to that. But in that moment, I understood exactly what you just said. Like I felt a draw to my generations, I felt an attachment to them. But in that moment, when I closed my eyes and could physically see and feel
Yeah.
those armies encircling me, life was different. I not only had a job and a responsibility to be Amy on all of the levels that I had to be, but now it's even bigger than that because you without using the language that you and I understand have a responsibility to convey to people that there is something bigger than them, bigger than who they are. And when you attach to it, there is infinite support, infinite love, a supply that is so far beyond that. And the hard part was that most of the people that I worked with, especially being in the military and being in the medical world, were so scientific. So,
Mm.
how do you convey this emotional and energetic attachment to individuals that are so logical and so scientific, but yet hold that space? Because I also, in working with those generals, worked with the troops that were traveling overseas and then coming home dismembered with bellies that were blown out and legs that were missing and living in that war state and finding a way to give them that comfort and that connection without having to try to take the time to pour a PhD into them to explain it
Yeah.
all. So that power was so much, but then I also knew that all I had to do was open my heart and my mind, and the tool that I could be didn't require me to do any of it because I was now plugged in to those masses. I knew them by face. I
Mm.
knew them by feeling, not just by reaching and desiring and wanting to be connected.
Wow. And I just want to go back to when you were saying, bigger than us. I would say
Yeah.
bigger than we currently have known ourselves to be.
Thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you for that correction. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, there is so much power and beauty and wisdom and potential that exists within all of us. Uh,
Yes.
yeah. So, Amy, your story is so incredibly powerful and the way you approach it. But, what was that turning point? What was it then that actually brought you to this path of who you are now, the kind of work that you do? After all of those challenges and tragedy and loss and grief and beauty, to now be on this path of service to others?
Absolutely. I, Kay, have remember that moment. I remember that moment of feeling connected, stronger than I ever had before.
Mm-hmm.
And understanding that even if it didn't all make sense, that there was purpose behind it.
Yeah.
And even though I knew that I had felt it, as a child and at different levels in my life where there was a solidarity to just keep going, that in that moment it was, no, it's bigger than this. Now it's time for you to give permission to your voice. And standing in my skin, asking myself, where do I start? Where do I even begin? And so I had always been a lover of the human body, always really enjoyed the miraculousness of it, connected to nature, connected to my source. But bigger than that, going, okay, if it is so miraculous, how is it that we, almost questioning myself, can't have more control over what's happening to ourselves? And so my father was always amazed by the power of the human brain and dropped little nuggets in my head that started coming back to me in that moment. Like, wait a minute, there is some control there. And so immediately, because I had been a manager over a number of people and done leadership and executive, corporate America, and run businesses and been mom and big sister to very large families, it was amazing to me how all of those truths just kind of materialized. Like it was a grand opening and all the puzzle pieces fell together beautifully and started making sense.
Even from the tragedy of that accident and injuries and grief.
Yeah, like literally it was an enlightenment. Absolutely it was. And it was like, oh, wait a minute. Now this all makes sense.
Yeah.
Why this all had to happen to culminate this event of enlightenment for myself.
Mm-hmm.
And so in that moment, it was, okay, how do I go deeper? So there was the Dr. Joe Dispenza, and there was, Dr. Lipton, and a number of different researchers. I found that I wasn't interested in those that simply spoke what they thought was important, but I needed that evidence to back the belief and be able to take the two worlds of research and combine it with the inner knowing, combine it with the feeling, combine it with that connection. And at that point, literally, I would say probably it's been about 12 years since that ignite has happened internally for me. And since then, there's been multiple levels of even going deeper, taking it from that general understanding of, the power of the brain and the connection to the body and the connection to source, and creating that triangle, that ultimate triangle of all of those amazing resources, but then being able to go even deeper and going, okay, well, we can speak it, but how do we really, truly train individuals, the skills that are already inside of them, to uncover them and unleash them and come in tune with themselves? And that's immediately where I went from there. And the last years has been that.
I just love that, Amy, because I'm very much about concepts alone doesn't change anything.
Exactly.
So I really relate to what you're talking about. Dr. Lipton's been around for forever and a day, and these people, and taking all of that. But as you say, taking it into that inner world and that inner knowing, and marrying that external and internal, the seen, the unseen, and living from there is the language you're talking about that I live, that I love. Yeah.
Well, and I truly believe that was a lot of draw between the two of us, Kay. The example that you've held for the 30 years of the work that you've done, it took us this moment to collide. And I had to be prepared for it. And God knows you had to be prepared for getting me in your world. But I can tell you the beauty in that confirmation.
Yes.
Of not the resistance of needing to know and understand, but simply the flow, the organic living, the effortless living of, okay, I'll welcome whatever it is that gets gifted to me and then figure out what it is that I need to know to embody that, to elevate my journey to the next space, going deeper within into the self mastery and the understanding and the inner knowing and the
Yeah.
application of all of those things that have brought us to that point.
I've just had chills just showering me the whole time you've been speaking. So would you say that the tragedy, the challenges, feeling on the outs, all of your whole life experience
Mm.
was designed to bring you to the passion and the purpose of the soulful work that you do now?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the beauty in learning to welcome all of that
Mhm.
in and reframing it. So a lot of the time with my clients, because I'm such a visual, I love children and I love simplicity. And so I'll say to them, we can't change the picture that's inside of the frame. We can't change that event that our mind sees and that's held in our heart.
Yeah.
But right now, if it's a painful or traumatic moment, that screen is probably tattered and torn, and the paint is peeling, and it's really gross, probably even in a dark place,
Yeah.
inside of our inner space. And if we were to take that picture out and put it under spotlights and celebrate it for the lesson that we gained and for the person that it allowed us to become, how differently we feel when
Mm.
we welcome those things in instead of resisting them and looking at them negatively. Because when we do that, we're attracting that negative. We're attracting more of that feeling. And when people understand the power behind that,
Yeah.
not only does their life change, but the lives of everyone that is around them from their example of their journey and their pivot and their great acceptance of the beauty of this essence, that we live in. And honestly, I can only imagine the things that I've covered for years that
Mhm.
I still haven't uncovered yet, that I need to be in a much more profound place to be prepared for when it's going to come to disrupt me. And so I believe in welcoming that disruption on that level. And
Yes.
I've always been told all of my life, Amy, you're too much. Amy, you're too much. Well, I converted that reframing into I'm your disruptor. And if you don't like it, you can carry on, but I'm going to continue being who I am.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. I love it. It's funny because
Mm.
I was, as I grew up, it's like, Kay, you talk too much. Kay, you're this too much. And then
Yeah.
one day in this journey, I went, too much for who? You know, too much
Exactly. Who
for
says
who?
so?
So I think the more that we can do this work authentically, genuinely,
Mm,
not dance around it, not have all the right books on the bookshelf or speak the right language, but really turn that vision inwards and as you say, take those concepts, that information, that science, all of it, but actually take it in and apply it and integrate it. We remember the light that we are, and then when we are that light, we're actually shining it into others.
mm,
So your final moment of what you'd like to say to the listeners.
absolutely. I truly believe that the greatest sentence of existence is I am.
Mm-hmm.
We don't need an explanation. We do not need justification or definition behind that. And when we focus on being, backed by doing to implement what it is, but starting in that focus of being
Yeah.
connected to who we are, who we're supposed to be, and who we're yet to become. That connected to our source is unstoppable. And I really believe the power of inner work
Mm-hmm.
will transform humanity on new levels. It's supposed to be hard. It's supposed to be challenging. It's supposed to be exciting. It's supposed to be disruptive. Our souls are constantly seeking further expression and expansion. So when we sit in average and mediocre, no wonder it hurts.
Wow, powerfully said. And I know that it actually gets easier the more that we understand that terrain.
Yes.
You know, we still feel pain, but it's like, oh, here I am. Okay.
Mm.
Oh, this is what's
Mm.
happening. Okay.
Exactly.
We surrender to it more and more each cycle that we do. Thank you
Amen.
so much, Amy. I love talking to those that do that courageous journey, that just don't sprout it,
Mm.
they grow it from within
Yeah.
themselves. And I really appreciate your time, your openness, your vulnerability,
Mm.
sharing your journey, because it's in that connectedness that we are also most powerful. It's not in pretending, I'm above being human now. It's sharing the story,
Mm.
it's sharing the vulnerability, it's sharing the journey,
Mm. Amen.
and also just being in your wisdom because of it. So thank you. I think before we pressed record again, because power dropped off a couple of weeks ago, so we're going to get this edited. I was thanking you for your grace, and grace is not a word that I throw around easily, but you, darling woman, you have grace, and I thank you for bringing it to this platform.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
And I will have your website at the bottom of the description so people can actually get in touch with you and find out if you're the person to work with or just to connect with your beautiful energy.
Magnificent. Thank you kindly. I'm excited to walk alongside and ignite others in giving themselves permission to be.
Thanks, Amy. Join me on my next episode. And if you love this podcast, please subscribe by clicking on the plus button if you're on Apple, or like and follow on Spotify, rate and review. And please share Inner Voice of Knowing with your friends.